Get Pucked.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Get Pucked podcast. Dave, Matt, and Vito here, and we're done. This is it. Preseason's over. Thank you so much. It's been a nightmare. I think it's fair to say it's not been a pleasant preseason. I don't think it was a good showing realistically for anybody. What are your takes, real fast, on it, guys? Just your takes on the games that we had over the last 2 weeks or so.
Well, in a way, it's exciting. You never get this much this many storylines or drama from preseason, right? That's reserved usually for the season. I mean, the preseason's usually a pretty boring thing, so you can't say that it was boring. But there is such a thing as too much excitement, and I think this is the opposite of what anybody sensible person really wanted in terms of happening to the organization. So, I mean, it was exciting as a fan perspective, but not great.
It's exciting for about 2 minutes before that game with Liney. Anyways, Vito.
The preseason is a pile of hot garbage. It's a waste of time. There's too many games, too many risks of players getting hurt. I mean, how many players, star players, known names out there were either injured or day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month, all these significant injuries for what? Just so that the NHL could get a bit more money and for more rumors to circulate now about the fact that, now they're going to reduce it by 2 games, but add 2 more games to the regular seasons was being discussed. Just stop. Have 3 preseason games. Let the teams go through their training camps and shake off the rust on a practice basis, and then just start the regular season a little bit earlier.
Yeah, I got to be in agreement with you boys. I mean, I've never been a big fan of. We're getting some feedback here. Sorry, guys. I've never been a big fan of the preseason to begin with. I think the games are far too long. I know they've shortened it in recent times. It was even longer before, which is outrageous. They really need to. They really need to consider reducing it, as much as humanly possible. Down to 3. I like that idea, Vito. I think that's fine. Do 3 games, 3 different teams, and then start the season earlier. I think is my biggest takeaway about this. It doesn't necessarily mean you're immune from injuries, but I think you reduce the risks of them over the longer course of the preseasons. That's my take. Anyways, now that preseason is over and concluded, one thing that we can discuss is, however, who were your standouts? I know it wasn't oh my God scoring bonanza for the Habs over the last 6 games, but just in general from their playing, who's out there on the ice that made that caught your eye? Who was somebody that brought something a little bit more than you perhaps expected? Start with you, Vito, as Dave, I think, is working on some mic situation here.
Yeah, I think the feedback was coming from his mic, but for me, it has to probably be Kapanen. He was the one player that's been consistent. One of the players that have been consistent. I mean, there's also Lane Hudson there, but I mean, you saw he was playing all-round situations. They put him on the wing, and he was still successful. He was being relied on. There was a lot of you were questioning whether he fits into the lineup right away coming out of camp. He's not Patrick Laney, but maybe he could be a piece to contribute and play a bit more of a two-way game and bring a different element than while Patrick Laney would have brought the goal scoring and all that. But at least it could be a stopgap until Patrick Laney comes back. It's gonna be interesting. But remember, Montreal brought him here and basically said, "Come directly to the main camp. Forget about the rookie camp. Come to the main camp." And there's no option for Laval for him either. It's NHL or back home. And if you look at everything he's done so far, he's standing out. He's showing that he could play at the NHL level, albeit it's preseason. Things can get a little. We know how things get in the regular season once the regulars are playing and the more talented players and whatever. But he did not look like he was out of place. He did not look like somebody who was struggling to keep up pace. He wasn't looking like somebody who you look down the stretch or you can try to look down the stretch and see that, hey, he's not going to be able to keep up to anything.
Okay, so Kapanen is your big dog, is your number one that stood out. Dave, how about you? Who's some of the standouts that you could tell us about from preseason in your estimation?
Definitely Struble for me.
Okay.
I think that he's a guy who clearly earns a spot on this top 6, and I really think that, I mean, he's proven, he really, really impressed me. I was kind of already sold on him from his play last year a little bit, but he really, really took a turn. And I think that he's solidified his spot on the opening night roster, probably at the expense of it's tough to say at whose expense, but definitely there's going to be some interesting choices for the Canadiens to make here going forward. So, yeah, definitely I would say Struble, and he kind of brings that element, a little bit of toughness element to it. Not a fighter per se, nowhere near what Xhekaj
he's a hard nose.
But he's definitely, he could hold his own. So he's a guy that definitely. I mean, I don't use blew me away too loosely, but he definitely one who really impressed me during this camp.
Dave, if it comes down that it's between him or Xhekaj opening night, who are you taking?
Struble.
You're putting Struble ahead of Xhekaj.
I'm telling you right now, Xhekaj. I'm a big Xhekaj fan. You guys know me. I like Xhekaj. Like, he didn't really take, his game hasn't evolved too much for me in the sense that you know what he brings and you know what he's there for. And I know he's an NHLer. He could play in the NHL for sure, and he could bring that toughness. And you want him in those hard-nosed games. And obviously, you open the season, Toronto, Boston, Ottawa. Like, you're going to want him in those games. But Struble brings a little bit more, I think, and I think that he has much more room to grow as well. And that's who I would put at this point. Xhekaj, it's really just the physical element that he brings to the table, which is not necessarily in this day and age always necessary. So I like Xhekaj the player. Don't get me wrong. I'm a big fan of his. I like his style. As a fan, it's very exciting to watch. But as a guy running a hockey team and you need to start racking up the wins, Struble's in my opening night roster over him.
Okay. We'll get to it there. We'll get to it.
I don't know if it's that hot. I honestly don't think if it's that hot.
I mean, there's a little sizzle on that one. I want to get to Xhekaj in a second. I just want to round out the question selfishly with my own answer to it, because I think surprisingly there was a lot of good players that played well that I thought deserve acknowledgement. Lane Hutson doing Lane Hutson things and showing it's still there was obviously very exciting. And he is a standout. I agree with Vito. I think Kapanen also was very refreshing to see and played really well. There were moments with Heineman even. I thought he did some pretty good flashes and some overall decent play. Mailloux was not bad. I can still see him starting in Laval, though. I wasn't like, oh my God, but I'll tell you who did kind of surprise me. And you know what? I'm buying in a little bit to the redemption tour. I hope things work out for him, but Justin Barron had a good camp. Mm-hmm. He had a good preseason. He did his job. He wasn't really a defensive liability at any point necessarily that I saw. I thought overall it was a much calmer Justin Barron, and somebody who I think you can say you're comfortable with as your third pairing, and he can do it, and that gives you a little bit of flexibility to keep some of the guys that are waiver exempt and can go down and play and get some bigger reps in Laval, and you're not necessarily having like a black hole there or a pylon or whatever your analogy is by putting Justin Barron. I thought he had a good camp. I'm not saying he's going to live up to the hype that he was sold when he was coming over here in that trade. But I was surprised, pleasantly surprised with his play. So that was something that really stood out. For the Xhekaj thing, to come back to that one, I initially had something I was going to ask you guys about, and then I decided not to, but now I think I'm going to, since you kind of opened the door a bit. So Xhekaj had whatever, I think it was 49 penalty minutes.
47,
racked up 47, 49 penalty minutes. He got tossed out of 2 games back to back, and then he fought in the third game when he was back. In that instance, he wasn't tossed. But to Dave's point, I was going to ask, has he played himself out of his spot? Some people, we know this guy is super polarizing. We know anybody who's not a Canadiens fan hates him. All you see is hate thrown his way because he's doing Xhekaj things, right? He's putting his fist in other players' faces, and their fan base aren't very happy. That's an obvious. But even from a Habs fan's perspective, some are saying he has to learn when to take his shots. Some are saying he's too reckless. Some is saying that he's a defensive liability. Some is saying, to what Dave is kind of alluding to, beyond the physicality, there's not much else there. Some on the other side are saying, look at that goal he scored in the last preseason game. Hell of a shot. He's got a great boomer there. His presence alone gives you that reminiscent, a bit of like the Emmeline, you come down on my side and I'm going to put you through the board kind of thing. There's a bit of that intimidation factor. And he's gradually honing his skills and getting a little bit better from just playing defense. And then, of course, there is the fact that he's there to throw down when he needs to. So I ask you guys this. I'll start with you, Vito, because Dave kind of already talked about it, but he can come back after the fact. After the whole preseason now is over, and given the play of the other defensive prospects that are here and the guys, does he still have a guaranteed spot in your top 6?
100%. 100%.
You got to keep
you got to keep Xhekaj there because for all the reasons you mentioned, he's still. I think that a lot of teams, especially teams that have gotten a bit more, that have gotten a bit bigger, that added a bit more sandpaper, they're going to take their liberties with the smaller, skilled forwards that the Habs have, and you need somebody to kind of police or be the sheriff, no pun intended, on the ice there and Xhekaj is that guy. Now the thing is that some people argue and say, hey, if Xhekaj is in the box when these people start taking their liberties and doing their things, then how is he going to help the team? That's where I think Montreal needs to eventually consider adding another element other than just Pezzetta being that next person to be able to, help and protect the team and whatnot and things like that. Because it's going to happen. The last thing we want is to have all these talented, skilled players getting hurt, getting pushed around, getting shoved around and whatever, or having to stick up for themselves and getting hurt in a fight, in a scrum, whatever ends up happening there, because we decided to sit up Xhekaj because he got too many penalty minutes. Even St. Louis came out saying that he approves everything that Xhekaj did that first night where he got kicked out. Because players were actually head hunting, or at the very least, it looked like they were trying to hurt one another. Now, they're always going to come out and say nobody goes out there and tries to hurt. But when you're in the heat of the moment and you're frustrated and whatnot, stupid things happen. So I think having somebody like Xhekaj in the game to do what he's doing, but I think you need to have him and he's there 100%. At the same time, they need to get him to utilize his other skill set. Leverage that boomer shot that he has. Consider putting him on the power play. It might be an additional threat rather than always doing the same thing over and over again and hoping that it's going to change. Have him be more of a defensive defenseman. If you can find a way to get him to become kind of like a Dan Girardi, but physically and imposing, then you got something there, and you got a guy who's on the third pairing who's really, really strong. I still believe that Xhekaj, if he puts it all together, could be a solid number 4.
Okay, fair enough. I agree with most of those points. Dave?
Yeah, look, I mean, in a perfect world, that's where he develops into, right? A guy you could use on the power play, but he's been here for a bit now, and he hasn't taken that step forward. He's kind of that one trick. Like, how many booming slapshot goals have you guys seen? Honestly,
how many goals have we seen from them doing the drop pass?
No, okay, but I'm not saying that works. I'm not saying that works, but what I'm saying is, he needs a lot of time in order to get that shot off. He's not the type of player that it's going to happen too often. He's not going to be put in those positions. It's just, to me, he is what he is, I think, and I think it's a pretty limited thing. At the end of the day, who do you think is a better defenseman right now, Xhekaj or Struble? Better.
Right now, I feel like it's like 4 quarters for $1, just that I get a bit more of something that the Habs need in Xhekaj.
If Xhekaj played over Struble, I wouldn't go, oh my God, vice versa the same way. Maybe I would give the tip that as a better defenseman, it's Struble by a touch, but he doesn't bring that other thing that Arber brings.
I think you guys are going to be surprised during the season if Struble makes the team, which I think he will. If he plays more every night, I think you guys are going to slowly see him develop into something more than what you're talking to now.
The other thing when you're saying that he didn't take a step ahead in Xhekaj, is that the guy is also coming off 2 shoulder injuries, right? That might have put him a bit of a step back from the rest of his game, other than beating people up or getting into fights or being extremely physical all the time. So if the guy was able to, if he didn't get those 2 shoulder injuries, then maybe you'd be seeing, because there was times last year before he got hurt where he didn't just get into fights and he was defensively sound. You saw him make some rush plays. He was doing some things.
If he could fight, if he could lay out the hits and fight, he could. There's no reason his shoulder should be affecting any other part of his game. Realistically, I understand injuries happen, and I understand the injury excuse that you could use all the time. But realistically, if he's playing every night and he's 100%, like you can't use that really as an excuse to why.
No, but at the same time, like last year he had his shoulder injury, and apparently he wasn't telling anybody because he wasn't telling anybody for whatever reasons he had. How do you wind up? It's hard to wind up and rip a cannon of a shot when your shoulder's messed up.
Which is fine, but fact remains, it's not like, yeah, you can sit around and do the what if game, but he did have surgery and he did have an injury and he is what he is now. So now it's a debate whether or not what's he going to be able to do now that he's had 2 injuries.
I like Arber Xhekaj. You guys know, like I don't want to see like I'm coming off as a hater.
No, you called it years ago that this guy was a stud.
And I think he could still develop. Don't get me wrong, but I think at the time being, I just think that he hasn't really the preseason that he had was the exact type of preseason he needed to have in order to make the team. And that's not a hot take at all. I think that he really needed to showcase his physicality and what he could bring to the team aside from his defending, because he was in danger of losing his spot. And you saw the scales tilted, and I think that he played it perfectly. And I think that kudos to him. He adapted to what he needed to do. But that was if all this stuff hadn't happened, I don't think we'd be having the same discussion about how much Arber Xhekaj.
I will say this, Dave. Right now it's preseason, so it's like kind of like who cares, right? Regular season, it matters. Obviously, you're trying to get into the playoffs and all that. But the things that he's doing now, and the penalties he's taking now, and whatnot, those things can't happen as frequently, if at all, come playoff time. The day they get into playoffs, he's going to have to be a little more careful. He's going to have to use his physicality, but it's going to be more on the body checking, clearing the front of the net, not just grabbing somebody and tossing them unless he really has to.
Even in the regular season, he can't be taking those penalties, as many penalties as he is taking. I think that the preseason is another beast, because you're facing these guys. You're never going to see that storyline of they're going to dress players that want to hurt my team, as you did this last weekend, right? This past Saturday, you saw St. Louis. It depends on who I'm going to dress, because you're not going to see that during the regular season. So his role kind of diminishes in that sense. You're going to have maybe 1 or 2 games where you're really thankful that Xhekaj was in the lineup because of that physical element, as opposed to the preseason where it's probably you'd want him there every game. So that's just my take on it.
And let me piggyback on that, because I think you're nailing something there pretty good. And I don't know, you were talking and I just had to look it up to get the full context of the quote. But the moment you said that, and this might sound silly, but it reminded me of a quote from the Iron Man movie, the first one. You got Tony Stark out there. And Iron Man. And he's busy trying to sell his Jericho missile system or whatever. And he goes, I'll read it here. He says, they say the best weapon is the one you never have to fire. And I respectfully disagree. I prefer the weapon you have to fire once. Now, in this instance, he fired it 3 times. But same premise. Xhekaj showed what he'll do to you. He showed what's there still. He reminded everybody. Maybe they thought, after the shoulder, maybe he's not the same guy. He threw down. And fact remains, the NHL still is not without fighting. This is still a thing, and there is more physicality now than perhaps there has been in quite some time. You need the deterrent. You need the sheriff. You need this guy out there, because you need people to not take liberties with your team. And as long as he's not completely a defensive liability and really causing you problems when he's not fighting, which I don't believe he is, then I think you need a guy like him, to the point where even like the rumors out there are suggesting now that you alluded to, Vito, that Kent Hughes is possibly looking to even bolster up front and find a guy bottom 6 who can bring that kind of element so it doesn't all fall on Xhekaj. I mean, there is Pizzetta, of course, which might do the trick, but maybe they want somebody perhaps a little bit more well-rounded in the hockey.
The other thing I want to bring up too with Xhekaj, let's go back to the Ottawa one where, Stützle basically hit himself in the face with a stick, but it'll kind of look like Xhekaj. Anyways, we're not going to go into into that one, but at the end of the day, Xhekaj's a 5'6", he's playing as a 5'6". When he got into that fight with Tkachuk, which was basically a wrestling match, he took out their number 1 or number 2 player debate for a 5. So as long as Xhekaj stays in that lane of being, I'm a 5'6" guy or even a 4 guy, I'm out of the equation, but I took your number 1 out. It's mission accomplished.
It's just like, I think we sometimes see this from a hockey fan perspective and not really from a hockey player perspective. Xhekaj was in the lineup. Did it stop Pare from sticking his knee out, according to you guys, and hitting Laine. No. The very next day, Xhekaj's in the lineup also. Did it stop the Sens, or they knew that they were going to face Xhekaj? Did it stop Greg from taking a shot at that? It doesn't stop. I don't think there's such a thing as a deterrent, really. I think that's a myth from hockey fans who think that, oh, this guy is so scared of Xhekaj that he's not going to. Look how many incidents happened, and Xhekaj's been there the whole time. What did it stop?
Well, there's
really.
But
honestly, I'm asking you. But did it stop one single incident?
You can't fix stupid. Back then, one of the heavyweights a few years ago was Milan Lucic. He was still getting into fights. There was still some idiot that was going to do something to go and,
I understand, but what you guys are talking about.
There's always one.
But my point is, it doesn't act as a deterrent.
I think preseason is a unique area where perhaps it doesn't play the same level as it would in a regular season. I think the guys you named are fringe NHLers and or not NHLers, and they would do anything no matter what to stand out. So I don't really think that's a factor. I think in a real game, if Arber Xhekaj's there and the puck goes to the net and they all scramble at it, instead of taking those extra shots and smacking your goalie, or instead of trying to lay out an open ice dangerous hit, they won't do it necessarily as often. They don't play hockey. Hockey players play hockey, but there might not be the whole team, but there might be enough on the other team, a little trepidation before they do something dumb, knowing that I can get away with it just because you got a guy here that's like that. Again, to what you're saying, I kind of agree. I don't think this is a full-blown, he's out there walking around, going across the ice like this, and nobody's doing, and they're all scared. No, but if you do something against the Canadiens, if you're overly physical or act the fool, you will have to answer the bell.
It's the pause, and there's
more.
Not
have to if he's not there.
There's more players in the NHL that are not willing to pay the price than those that are willing to pay the price. So like it's like when Shea Weber was there was a lot of players that wouldn't go in front of the net when Shea Weber was done because they knew that they were going to get a cross check on the back or whatever the case may be there. It's that moment where some players are going to pause before they decide to go completely stupid. Like here, for example, last night's game, Cousins tried to go and hit Xhekaj from behind. Cousins played a stupid game, and he found out. He hit the floor right away.
Okay,
you know what I mean?
That's a fan thing. It's cool to see as a fan, but it does nothing. He still took a run at Xhekaj. You know what I mean? Like it didn't.
You can't fix stupid. There's always going to be somebody who's going to try to go after the big dog.
But your guys' arguments for having him in the lineup is because it will prevent these things, and I'm saying that it will not prevent these.
I never said it will prevent. I'm saying.
I think
as a deterrent. I think everyone used the word deterrent.
A bit of a deterrent. I believe it will be, not to the point where it's going to stop dumb things from happening, but you're better off having that there than not having it.
Yeah.
And I think he's a good enough defenseman that I prefer to have him there if it's 50-50 or if it's 55-45 to Struble, for example, to take your example, versus Xhekaj as an overall defenseman. I'd rather take the 45 Xhekaj with that element. Because if you don't have it, we've seen what happened to this team a couple seasons ago when they didn't have a tough guy. And they were smacking around our goalie and nobody went up to it. And they were busting people in open ice and nobody was answering for it. It's a reality of the game.
But you're seeing it more and more that teams are wanting to at least have one or two guys like this to at least police it and whatnot, because it's happened. Look at New Jersey last year. They didn't have enough sandpaper, they didn't have enough grit, they didn't have enough toughness.
Sandpaper and grit are different. Yeah, these things are different.
They are, but I'm just saying they didn't have the toughness, so much so that one of our followers, who's a huge New Jersey fans, and he's one of our subscribers too, I believe, he always says it. He kept saying it all year long, hoping that they would trade Xhekaj to the New Jersey Devils. There are teams out there that need a player like Xhekaj and want a player like Xhekaj, and Montreal has him.
I think it matters more to the fans a little bit more. And I get that the teammates appreciate Xhekaj coming to his defense and whatnot. But I think that when you're making a team and you're forming a team, I don't think it comes into that much consideration as you guys think, is what I'm saying. And I'm just saying, like, you look at the biggest incidents in hockey. Mark Savard, for example, the Matt Cook hit on Mark Savard. Like, you think he was scared of the big bad Bruins? He did it anyways.
Matt Cook was an idiot.
Okay, but there's someone like you know what I mean. It doesn't exist as a deterrent. Is what I'm saying. I would prefer. I don't believe
bottom line. The TLDR. You'd like to have a guy like him on your team. Yes, are we not all in agreement?
Yeah, for sure. Okay. And if he could be an NHL player, like I'd like a guy like Tom Wilson on my team. It doesn't mean I'd go give him the contract Washington gave him, and it's going to be the worst contract in the year for years to come in the league.
That's a whole other kettle of fish to talk about contract. Just talking about the guy specifically because the whole fallout with everything, there was a little bit out there of people saying, hey, listen, if this is all he's going to do and he's going to goon it up, he's going to be a liability, he's going to cause a lot of short man disadvantage on the ice, it's a problem. What else is he going to do? And I think the preseason, that was specifically where you went, Dave, with it, and I really liked it, was he kind of needed to show this. Mm-hmm. That fighting camp he did with Larocque in the offseason and the stuff and coming back from the injury, like you had to show that he was still there and ready to let loose, and it was important. And I think it's good for the Canadiens to have a guy like this. You just hope that he takes his game to the next level. This went on much longer than I anticipated. I want to finish on one thing because I wanted to talk about it last time, and it only got reinforced after this last preseason. The power play.
Oh, boy.
The power play. When over whatever it was and is still garbage. Pure and utter unmitigated garbage. What do they got to do? What has to change? Is it as simple as put Lane Hutson on power play 1 and everything's going to be magic like some people out there are suggesting? Or does something else have to happen? What do you guys think? What should they do? Okay,
I mean, first off, Lane Hutson was. I mean, look, I don't think that's just the answer of just playing it. Okay, yeah. The only saving grace, the only saving grace here is that Marty St. Louis for sure did not work on his power play too much during the training camp, right? Like he has other things to deal with. He has 9,000 players that he has to work at and look at and take it. So they didn't take the people and work on the power play as much. You don't care about the veterans. The veterans didn't really play in every game, so. That's the saving grace. So if you're like extremely worried about the power play because of what you saw in preseason, you can mitigate it a little bit because it's not. I'm not concerned by what I saw in the preseason. There are things I'm concerned about.
It was really bad. It was really, really bad. Okay,
it was identical. Okay, so that's what
it was. Exactly. You got exactly what you had last year, and it was terrible.
Yeah. So that's the preface of my argument. Okay, but at the end of the day, I think that a big overhaul in terms of strategy and how it's going to happen needs to go. I mean, I think they need to work on it from day one. You start the season starts on Wednesday, Thursday, whatever. You're working on it nonstop, different strategies. You're in a room and you're drawing up different things because this stupid system that they have is clearly not working. Everybody knows it, and they know it too. They're not idiots. Well, I would hope not. They're going to fix it, I think, okay? And it's not a personnel issue per se because you have some hitters, you have the personnel to do it, in my opinion. You could run a good power play with who they have. They just need to change it up so much better than how it is right now and running it. And, you know, the Canadiens don't really run their power play through the back end anyways. Like Matheson is not the quarterback of this power play. You know what I mean? It's run differently. So saying you're just going to bring in Lane Hutson there and everything's going to magically be okay because he could dangle and stick handle across people, that's not how it works. You need to get a better zone entry. There's a million things that need to change on that power play. We're going to need a whole episode to talk about it, I think. I think we're going to have to, like, I'm convinced I could draw up a better power play system than what they have going right now. So,
I mean,
they just need, it needs to get better. If they're going to be really like taking a run at it, like it needs to be better. Their penalty kill is not that great either. Like it's just like their special teams really needs to improve if they're going to go anywhere really and do any damage at all. Like it's hard to watch.
We're just focusing on Marty St. Louis' power play because we're talking about right now, but the power play for the Montreal Canadiens has been bad pretty much since Guy Carbonneau was there.
Yeah,
it's been awful. And before it was very predictable. It's just get a defenseman who could rip a cannon of a shot and just keep feeding that defenseman till they keep breaking ankles,
breaking faces. Yeah, but you know what? At least there was like to the net kind of like, you know what I mean? Yeah, it was predictable and it was
regardless.
Silly.
And the Sheldon Surrey days were the best.
I hate that. I wish we go back to that to get to that era versus what we're in today. But wow, man.
It's been bad that long. And yes, Lane Hutson, you should definitely try him or start him as your QB power play guy night one.
Okay, but remember, Jonathan Drouin was supposed to be that guy too, okay? And it's impressive. But people read it, man. The problem is that it becomes people can read it and it becomes predictable, and you're just trying to feed the same way. And it's the same thing, right? Shea Weber for a long time was feed Shea Weber. Then it was Jonathan Drouin was going to run it. Then, or vice versa in terms of the timeline. And then it was Cole Caulfield, right?
But we haven't had a quarterback at all for the power play since Markov. And the only person who has a chance of being that QB is Lane Hudson. So you put him night one, and then it's the strategy, because you're right. The personnel's there. Slavkovsky's there, Suzuki's there, Caulfield's there. Put Lane Hudson and put another forward there. Okay? That's how I see it. Or if you even want, put Mike Mathis, because the guy's basically a forward on defense.
I mean, you can do 2 deep.
But they gotta change the strategy, because if I have to go through another year of that drop pass, I'm gonna lose my mind. That's one. Two, if with some fans, or all Habs fans, mostly, I would say all, yeah? Okay. We're all saying that this is a chance that the Montreal Canadiens could be in the mix for the playoffs. If that power play does not improve significantly, forget it. There's no playoff hopes. Zero. Because they were among the worst in the NHL. And if you're not at the very least in the middle of the pack on power play, you have no chance.
It just feels so rushed, their power play. It's as if they know that their power play sucks, and they come in and they're just they're like chickens with their heads cut off. Like, it's just so weird the way they act on the power play. It's a very bizarre power play to watch.
They pass too much. They're always, no one wants to be the
overthinking it.
They overthink it. It is equivalent exactly to the Josh Anderson of last year, in my opinion, where he just, I don't know, it got in his head, and he just, before every shot, he probably said to himself, I'm going to miss. And he willed himself to miss. Nobody can miss as often unless Matt, if you're trying. And the power play is the same thing in my estimation.
It's even worse. It's even worse because last year it got to a point that when we got the power play, we were hoping we weren't getting a power play. We were better 5-on-5 than on the power play. When we got the power play and nothing happened, the momentum actually crashed for the Montreal Canadiens.
And how many shorties did they get against them as well? There was quite a few last year as well. Listen, the whole thing, top to bottom, is like I said in the onset, it's an unmitigated garbage dump. It's a disaster. It's terrible. They have to do something. The only thing that I will, you know what, as a desperate man trying to grab onto anything and not drown in it, is what Dave is suggesting. Maybe Marty hasn't really taken the real time necessary and had the personnel that was playing often enough to really show you what his 2 power play units are going to be. That's the only thing. Please, please, please let that be reality, because to your point, Vito, if they just come back and say, you know what, if we maybe start the drop pass 2 feet more to the right, we're going to, I think we're all going to throw our TVs out the window.
Well, I'm hopeful, and I hope Dave's right. But at the same time, it was a couple of episodes ago, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe even last episode, where Dave said, hey, Burroughs is gone. Maybe the whole time it's been Marty St. Louis drop pass. Which I hope that's not the case. I hope that's not the case. Because I don't want to see that drop. You want to know what? You bring up that, if they do that drop pass 1 out of every 20 power plays, I'm okay with that. If it's literally the same thing, doesn't matter the personnel, every single game, that's the power play move they do, then yeah, every NHL team's going to know about it. Every AHL team's going to know about it.
It's a bizarre thing to see. My little final thought on it, you guys are welcome to add one final thought after. It's bizarre to see somebody do the same thing over and over again when you're not successful. I can understand if the draw pass was connecting 4 out of 10 times. You're like, okay, 40% of the power play. Wow, man, that's not terrible. Let's just keep doing it. Let's keep doing it and maybe sharpen it. Maybe we get to 5 out of 10. Maybe we get to 6 out of 10. But you're 0 out of 10. You're negative out of 10. Like, at what point do you just look at this and say, you know what? This is just really not the move. We got to try something else. Even if it's a complete fail. Make the flying V come out from behind your net. I don't care what it is.
Easy there,
just
Mighty
do
Ducks.
Something different. You got to do something different. This is just not working. My last take on it.
The flying V.
Could it be worse? Could it be worse? Really. Anyways, final thought on anything? Any final thought you want to add on anything?
I do want to go back to one little thing. I think it was the first question, preseason standout. One player that wasn't mentioned, and he just got better and better as the preseason went on, and really showed that he can also keep up to the North American game, is Engstrom. Just a little.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Engstrom, quiet, subtle in the sense like he didn't cause massive mistakes. but he really is adapting rather quickly to the NHL game. And we spoke about Adam Engstrom several episodes ago, even before the end of last season, where we said, keep an eye on this guy.
Yeah.
And again, keep an eye on this guy.
Fair point. Very good. Dave?
Yeah, that's it, man. I'm interested to see what they do, who they open up the season with. I'm interested to see how it goes from here and the personnel changes. And, of course, that power play, it really needs to get fixed. That's priority. They game 3. By Saturday, I want to see something a little bit different. You know, I want to see some change. And I want to next week when we record, it's a completely different subject than this. But, yeah, I mean, look, it was an exciting preseason to say the least. Exciting, not necessarily positive, not necessarily negative, but it was exciting.
Lots. Hockey came back with a bang, which I guess is, you know, overall better that than a whimper. Losing every game and getting beaten every time in preseason is not fun, as we remember a couple of years ago. They lost every single preseason game. Yeah,
preseason. If the start of the regular season is going to be anything like the preseason it was, I feel terrible. I hated the preseason. I hated the preseason for the Habs. I hated the preseason in general, but for the Habs, it wasn't that great.
Well, here's fingers crossed. We got real hockey coming up in a couple days. It's very, very exciting. This was our season opener for the upcoming season. So thanks to everybody who is keeping up with us in the very long off season. We appreciate every one of you. And if you're new and this is the first time you've caught us and you made it all the way this far, thank you very much. We appreciate each and every one of you. Consider liking and subscribing if you haven't to keep updated and notified when we're dropping new content. We're getting a lot more active this year on the other socials as well. We got TikTok, we got Instagram, we got all the other fun stuff that you might be plugged into. So take a look for us there as well. And this is going to be a fun season, one way or another. I'm happy hockey's back. So for Dave and Vito, I'm Matt. And this was
Get Pucked.